you going, Jacob? Oh, he just bailed. Stop.
You thought caves were fascinating, but the reality is grim. From YouTubers getting stuck in narrow spaces to suddenly rising water levels, here are 6 terrifying cave moments caught on camera. Flooded tunnel, Cantrell Caving. Let's start the list with the most outrageous one. So, a YouTuber named Alex from the channel Cantrell Caving nearly lost his life on November 3, 2023. His passion was to explore some of the most dangerous caves and randomly encounter unpredictable cave systems around the world. Here's how it happened. Alex took a group of 4 young men with him, including his close friend Jacob. They all went out to explore a cave that they had never been in before, but little did they know, this would be the biggest mistake of their life. The stage was set. They would follow the rope, reach the end, and document the whole journey. But if movies have taught me one thing, it's that things almost never go as planned, and the same is what happened here. At first, everything was going fine. They had their headlamps on, boots laced, and spirits higher than Burj Khalifa. But when they moved deeper inside, unaware that the conditions had already changed, things took a turn for the worse. Not long into their descent, they found themselves fighting against rising water. The cave's narrow passages were halfway flooded, making every step harder and even more dangerous. Thanks to all the moisture inside, the air was thick and heavy, and the rocks were slippery enough for you to never be able to push yourself further. The result? These guys were laughing, talking about reaching the end of the tunnel, but beneath the surface, something else was brewing. Tension was starting to build. Jacob, who scouted part of the route ahead, tried to warn them that some sections were completely underwater. In other words, they would need to duck their head just to go through. But there's no way to breathe in parts of it. Still, the group wanted to give it a go and pushed forward, following the rope and hoping that nothing would go wrong. But as they went deeper into the tunnel, fear was showing on Alex's face, and the arrogant face just disappeared. There was no confidence left, and his movements also grew tense and frantic on the video. The water level kept rising till it filled his ears, and the only way to breathe was to tilt his head straight up toward the ceiling, to the point where he wouldn't even be able to see the next thing properly. In just a couple of minutes, all the friends started panicking, struggling to breathe, and one of them even grabbed onto Alex in desperation, nearly dragging him underwater too. But despite these struggles, they somehow managed to keep their heads above water and pulled themselves back towards the line. And by the time they reached back, both Alex and his friends were scraped, bruised, and completely exhausted. It could have ended very differently for anyone, but if you're smarter, then you'd subscribe to stay ahead of these disasters. Smothered in a claustrophobic cave.
In the passage. These kinds of maneuvers can be dangerous if the caver is alone. But with the team present...
This man was exploring a cave when he reached a dangerous passage that was so narrow it damn near ended him. He was determined to push forward, so like any other daring Chad, he squeezed into a tight gap and nearly became stuck. This video was uploaded to YouTube back in 2022 with the title Smothered in a Claustrophobic Cave, and it surprised everyone. The man behind the channel, Caveman Hikes, already posted dozens of similar videos where he would escape after a long and risky exploration, but this one was different. For a while, he was trying to push even deeper into the cave while carefully maneuvering his body through spaces that could crush anyone. He talked about his strategy, explaining how he uses his feet against the ceiling to push himself backward whenever he needs to. Eventually, he realized that he was already stuck. His clothes were bunched up against the rock, making it even harder to move. His knee pads are cashed down to something. The more he struggled, the more stuck he became. At that moment, he decided not to risk it any further and began carefully backing out of the way. The entire sequence was just claustrophobic to watch. Imagine being wedged between solid rock with no room to turn around, unable to see where you're going, with only inches of clearance on both sides. One wrong move could make you permanently stuck in a position where rescue would be almost impossible. Fortunately, he managed to escape without any injuries, but the footage would make anyone creep out and not go to any tight spaces over again. Would you go into any of these caves? Let us know in the comments below. Adventure Twins experience?
If I want to stand my head up, I can't. It just goes under.
Next up is a very interesting yet crazy story from the YouTube channel Action Adventure Twins, run by two brothers, James and Edward. Since early 2020, they have been exploring some of the most dangerous and extremely tight cave systems while documenting them on their channel. However, the brothers didn't know what was coming to them in March 2021. One of their expeditions made them see death closely. They decided to go to a cave in Georgia called Patty John Cave. This was a well-known crazy cave that not a lot of people were attempting to visit. By that time, they had already visited several sections of this maze-like cave system, even discovering an underground waterfall during one of their trips. However, this time their goal was to go towards one of the most difficult sections of the cave. This cave is called the Nervous Breakdown. This is a title that perfectly describes the mental state of anyone who attempts to pass through it. The beginning of the trip went quite smoothly. The brothers squeezed through a narrow entrance and reached the first open chamber. However, soon enough, the passage began to narrow again, forcing them to crawl through tighter and tighter spaces for about 25 minutes of crawling. They faced their first big obstacle, which was a muddy water chamber with a narrow pit in the middle that had to be carefully skirted along the edge. One wrong move would mean falling into the tight shaft with almost no chances of surviving. After going safely through the dangerous area, they finally reached the entrance to the infamous Nervous Breakdown. Interestingly enough, part of the surrounding area had already collapsed, making it even harder to find a safe route forward. Rocks were just going everywhere, and there were narrow drops surrounding them. After a long search, Edward finally located an entrance and decided to go down, leaving his brother above as the backup in case something went wrong. He had no idea that his decision would become one of the biggest mistakes of his life. After he descended deeper, he tried to contact his brother, but there was no response. He suddenly found himself in a nightmare scenario where he was lost in an unknown part of the cave, with no way of communicating. At first, he tried to stay calm and move forward, while hoping that he wouldn't meet James somewhere ahead. But after 30 minutes of searching and calling out with no answer, the grim reality began to sink in. He knew that panic was the worst possible reaction, but his anxiety was slowly taking over. With every step, the situation got even more desperate. The passage was getting tighter, and he was slowly starting to panic. After what felt like endless wandering in circles, Edward finally spotted a small but familiar detail, which was a piece of marker tape. He had noticed it on his way down. Following it, he was finally able to find his way back and reunite with his brother. After reuniting, the brothers stayed together for the rest of the expedition and eventually made it out of the cave without serious injuries. Lost John's Cave Case. The next story is from January 2014, when a group of cave explorers set out to conquer a cave that no one dared to. It was called Lost John's Cave in Lancaster, England. The impressive cave system was around 3 miles in length, with known depths reaching around 700 feet. Most of the team had years of caving experience behind them, so it wasn't like they were anyone new. They carefully prepared for the expedition, studying maps, planning their routes, and packing the necessary gear. However, in the world of caving, there is one brutal truth. It's that when something goes wrong, no amount of screaming or help can save you. This is exactly what happened with one of the members, Bob Johnson. At first, the expedition was going smoothly, and the team was moving into deeper parts of the cave, using their equipment to overcome the tough obstacles. Everything changed when they reached a section known as the tube, which was an extremely narrow passage that required crawling forward on their stomachs. To make things worse, parts of the passage were filled with water, making breathing and seeing even more difficult. The Nothingness member went first and managed to squeeze through. Bob Johnson was next, and he was much less fortunate. At first, he made a little progress through the tube, but soon enough, he was struggling in the slightly wider section. That's where his luck ran out. He became completely wedged from the waist down, and every attempt to save him only made matters worse. Bob knew that he had a short time before drowning became a real possibility, so he fought through, but the water soaked through his clothing, making him even heavier and his escape moments even more difficult. Just when the situation seemed completely hopeless, one of the team members had an idea that would save Bob's life. Instead of pushing him forward, they carefully pulled him back the way he came. Surprisingly enough, it worked. Later, Bob shared his comment that he and the other two teammates who had rescued him had to crawl for another 3 hours to just escape the cave and go outside. Jacob's experience with abandoned mine. This case horrified everyone. The unsettling video was filmed by a person called Jacob, who was an experienced explorer obsessed with uncovering the secrets of abandoned mines for over 20 years. He had descended into forgotten tunnels, documenting his journeys and sharing hidden details that nobody else knows. On a cold, rainy evening of December 5, 2017, he went down a dark, deserted road towards an abandoned mine, unaware of what awaited him. At first, everything seemed normal in the tunnel, but then things took a turn for the worse. After around 20 minutes of walking, something strange appeared on camera, which was a faint flashlight deep in the tunnel, like a distant flashlight beam. Even though Jacob didn't notice it at the time, moments later, the disturbing sound began to echo through the tunnel. There were soft whispers on camera. He was also surprised. Jacob turned back towards the entrance. But on his way, he noticed another tunnel he had missed before and cautiously decided to investigate inside. There were steel chains that hung from the ceiling. They looked ordinary at first until he saw one of them slowly swaying back and forth as if someone had just touched it. This was enough for Jacob for the day, and there he just left the scene, never coming back to explore it further. Spider Cave. Last one on the list is this 30-minute video that was filmed by a man named Daniel, who entered the cave with two of his friends, despite not having any proper cave experience. Only a few minutes after going underground, they got lost, as anyone would expect. While searching for a way out, Daniel discovered a small chamber, crawling with massive spiders, and to make matters worse, one of his friends nearly became stuck between those walls. At first, the group tried to stay calm, as if everything was under control, but as the video went on, the tensions rose. Fortunately, after a terrifying struggle in the darkness, they all managed to escape to find their way out unharmed. The footage gives us the perfect idea of how dangerous caves can be. One wrong mistake underground, and you're in deep trouble. But don't make the mistake of not subscribing because you're missing out on some great content. See you in the next one.